Entry hazards have existed in Pokemon since Generation 2, and as time has passed, new kinds have gradually been added. The mechanic is officially known as a trap, but in the Pokemon community they are known as entry hazards because they trigger when a Pokemon is switched in or otherwise enters battle. They all do different things, but they all share a common goal: putting pressure on the enemy team's switches. In many competitive games there is a concept of pressure. Although the exact terminology may differ from game to game, I'm going to generalize for the sake of brevity. After all, being hyperfixated on terminology over concepts is the fastest way to alienate multilingual people and people who play a variety of games. Pressure is the concept of having a player or resource positioned in such a way that you limit an opponent's options and resources. Depending on the game, limiting the opponent's options, making them hesitate, or making them believe they have to adapt is something that can pressure the opponent to take risks that you can punish. In a first-person shooter like Overwatch, a sniper existing is a form of pressure because you have to position extra carefully to avoid the potential one-shot. In a 2D fighter like Street Fighter, Ryu's Hadokens can make it hard to approach on the ground, but you also want to think twice about jumping in with bad spacing because he can Shoryuken. In all these examples, good enough pressure can make people have to switch characters, switch team members, switch strategies, and more to alleviate pressure. In competitive Pokemon, the most effective Pokemon tend to be used the most in a competitive environment. In those competitive environments, since the goal is to win, people will try to bring Pokemon that can help cover a wide range of threats that their competition may use. It's a cycle where two opponents try to trade resources like health and Pokemon to get an advantage and hopefully build up to their win condition. A core mechanic of Pokemon is switching out, and players have taken advantage of entry hazards to make switching in more punishing. It's another variable, another consideration, another chance for your opponent to make a mistake. It's something players have to prepare for and need to have an answer for. Entry hazards are extremely important to the game and are usually an excellent form of skill expression. However, Stealth Rock in particular has some traits that are unhealthy to the overall series. First, we will look at all the traits of the entry hazards. Then we will propose solutions to make Stealth Rock healthier and prevent the need to exit it in the future. We simply cannot talk about Stealth Rock in a vacuum, so there's a lot to go over. Watch until the end so that you understand the greater picture. You may not agree, and that's fine, but you'll understand my goals better. As of Generation 9, when this video is being released, we've seen 5 different types of hazards: spikes, poisonous spikes, pointed stones, sticky webs, and sharp steel. I'm saying it this way because there are now multiple moves that cause some hazards. All 5 types of hazards can be on the field at the same time, and the effects of their damage activate before any abilities that trigger on the switch can trigger. We aren't going to discuss Sharp Steel as much because this hazard is exclusive to Copperajah's access to the Gigantamaxing mechanic and the G-Max Steel Surge move. It just summons a Steel-type Stealth Rock clone after the attack, so refer to the Stealth Rock section later in the video, and then just picture the same mechanic but Steel-type. First up, Spikes. Spikes are created when a Pokemon uses the move Spikes or Ceaseless Edge. When a Pokemon uses either of these moves, they scatter spikes that will hurt some Pokemon when they switch in. Spikes only hurt grounded Pokemon because they are based on Caltrops, a type of spiky trap that were scattered by Roman soldiers and Japanese ninja as tools of area denial. If a Pokemon is flying type, has the ability to levitate, or is floating because of an item or effect, and is not currently holding an iron ball, they don't touch the ground, so they are immune to spikes. Spikes can be scattered to create 3 layers, and each layer added increases the damage dealt when switching in. One layer deals 1/8 or 12.5% of max HP. 2 layers deal 1/6 or 16-ish% of max HP, and 3 layers deal 1/4 or 25% max HP. About 45 families of Pokemon learn spikes or can set spikes. Next are poisonous spikes. These are created when a Pokemon uses the move Toxic Spikes or when a Pokemon with Toxic Debris ability is hit by a physical move. These hazards follow most of the mechanic Spikes has, with a few differences. They still only hit grounded Pokemon on the switch, but there can only be 2 layers of poisonous spikes. 1 layer inflicts the poison status on a Pokemon switching in, and 2 layers inflicts the badly poisoned status switching in. Poison types, steel types, and Pokemon immune to poisoning because of their abilities will still not be poisoned. If a grounded poison type switches in, they absorb and erase the toxic spikes on their side of the field. About 43 families of Pokemon can learn or set toxic spikes. The last hazard that only hits grounded Pokemon is the Sticky Web. Right now, Sticky Webs can only be placed by the move Sticky Web. There is no other move or ability that casts this effect. When a grounded Pokemon switches in, they get caught in the Sticky Web and lose 1 stage of speed. Sticky Web can only have 1 layer, so you can't get any more than 1 stage of speed dropped. About 12 families of Pokemon have access to Sticky Web. Then finally, the hazard you've seen the most, the pointed stones themselves. Pointed stones are summoned when a Pokemon uses Stealth Rock or Stone Axe. Since these stones levitate, they don't just hit grounded Pokemon, they hit all Pokemon, grounded or in the air. This hazard only has one layer, so only one turn is needed for setup. The effect of this hazard is to deal fixed damage based on how type effective Rock is on the Pokemon switching in. A Pokemon that is hit neutrally by Rock will lose 1/8 or 12.5% of their max HP. This is the standard damage that the other calculations are based on. For each type that resists Rock, the damage is halved, so a Pokemon that resists Rock takes 1/16 or 6.25% of their max HP, and a Pokemon that double resists Rock only takes 1/32 or 3.125% max HP. Pokemon weak to Rock take extra damage. A normal weakness to Rock increases damage to 1/4 or 25% of the max HP, and a Pokemon doubly Rock weak will lose half or 50% of their max HP. About 120 families of Pokemon have access to Stealth Rock. So we've covered all the types of entry hazards that still exist. So how do you deal with them? What is the counterplay? There are a few moves, abilities, and items that help remove or circumvent dealing with hazards. Just keep in mind that there is a counterplay for most of these counterplay. The moves Rapid Spin and Mortal Spin will remove traps from the user's side of the field if the move succeeds. But since Ghost types are usually immune to Rapid Spin and Steel types are usually immune to Mortal Spin, the opponent can predict the use of these moves and nullify their use. The act of blocking these moves to keep hazards on the field is known in the community as spin blocking. The move Defog will blow away hazards from both sides of the field and then drop the opponent's evasion. Opponents tend to use Pokemon with Defiant or Competitive ability because they boost attack and special attack respectively when their stats are lowered. Mousehole's signature move Tidy Up also clears all hazards from both sides of the field and grants an attack and speed boost to Mousehold. Cinderace's signature move Court Change will swap all hazards to the opposite side of the field, almost as if the Pokemon are changing courts or something. Pokemon with the ability Magic Bounce will bounce hazards back to their opponent's side if they were status moves. However, this can be circumvented by using moves like Stone Axe and Ceaseless Edge, since those moves are attacks first and foremost, with hazards being the secondary effect. Pokemon with the ability Mold Breaker can use their moves while ignoring opposing abilities, so they are free to set up hazards on a Magic Bounce Pokemon. Pokemon with the ability Magic Guard are immune to the damage-dealing effects of hazards, but they are still affected by Sticky Web's slowing effect. Magic Guard Pokemon will still be poisoned or badly poisoned by poisonous spikes, but they will not lose health from poison because Magic Guard negates indirect damage. Pokemon holding the item Heavy Duty Boots will be immune to all entry hazards because when they switch in, they head spin midair blocking all the rocks with their Tims before flipping and landing safely on the ground-based hazards. Even though Heavy Duty Boots negate hazard damage, poison types holding the item will still absorb the poisonous spikes from the field when switching in. The counterplay for Heavy Duty Boots is to swat them down with knockoff or, like in real life, steal their Tims. The last form of counterplay is maintaining good positioning. Pokemon that can viably set hazards are pretty recognizable. You know when they're waiting for a free turn to make progress towards getting hazards up. Hazards are an investment, and you normally have to choose between attacking and setting hazards. Limiting free turns you give away forces the player to be more selective about when they try to get layers of spikes up, for example. Right now you should be pretty caught up on the concept of entry hazards, their counterplay, and the counterplay for the counterplay. Hazards are a beautiful part of the game and a wonderful form of skill expression. This is similar to other field effects, like weather, dual screens, terrain. Hazards are simply another variable to your overall strategy that you can bring to abuse, or something you don't use but prepare to deal with. The chip damage that hazards provide can help turn the tide of certain matchups. Pokemon that require 2 or 3 good hits to knock out could now only take 1 or 2 hits to knock out, just from a layer or 2 of spikes. Hazards can pressure Pokemon that rely on the safety net of their Focus Sash to get value. Since you must be at full health to get the guaranteed survival effect of Focus Sash, trainers using these glass cannons need to have an answer for hazards. Either something to remove hazards, prevent them, or delete the hazard setters. Those decisions, calculations, and options add more depth and options to the game. However, we have a bit of a problem in this beautiful ecosystem, and it's Stealth Rock. You see, just like in a real ecosystem, there are winners and losers, and that's okay. Sheep simply can't compete with jaguars. That's life. But wouldn't it be a problem if jaguars, who were great at climbing trees, running, and swimming, could now fly too? That's overkill, right? That's the place Stealth Rocks are in. They do too much, too consistently, in one turn, and by too many Pokemon. On the opposite side, Sticky Web is probably the worst hazard because of its very low distribution, inconsistent effect, and the fact that most Pokemon that get this rare move are mediocre bug types. Compared to the other hazards, Spikes and Toxic Spikes are a happy medium because they get 4 times the distribution of Sticky Web, get more value, and are distributed on better Pokemon. So how do we rework Stealth Rock? It's a good question, but before I explain how, please pay attention to the following. All of my reworks so far have been proposals. Lists of changes and possibilities that could be mixed, matched, and tested before any kind of real implementation. This time around, we can't use all the reworked ideas at the same time. Stealth Rock would be useless and outclassed. Most importantly, Stealth Rock should still keep its niche of being a floating hazard that hits all Pokemon whether they are grounded or in the air. That is extremely important for basically guaranteeing chip damage and progress in a match, as well as remaining a form of counterplay for things like sturdy, focus sashes, floaters, and oddly specific gimmicks. Now let's talk about the different attributes that we can rework to adjust Stealth Rock. Attribute 1. Stealth Rock's effective power points. All of the hazards have a maximum of 32 power points, but think about the value of those power points. It takes 3 layers and 3 power points of Spikes to get the full effect of Spikes damage, which, might I remind you, caps at 25% max HP. Stealth Rock can shave off up to 50% from 1 layer and 1 power point. When you think about it this way, Spikes is effectively just under an 11 power point move, with respect to getting full value. Spikes require multiple turns of good play to get the full effect. What if Stealth Rock required 2 layers to have the same effect it has now? What if the max you can deal to a double Rock weak Pokemon is 25% with 1 layer and 50% with 2 layers? Attribute 2. Stealth Rock's distribution. If it's Rock, Ground, or Steel, it probably gets Stealth Rock. It's also been handed out to a bunch of random Normal and Psychic types. I actually don't think the distribution needs a hit. For the most part, it's usually learned by appropriate Pokemon. Lowering the distribution doesn't change Stealth Rock from being the best and easiest hazard to set. It doesn't help the solo types and dual types that can't switch in. Stealth Rock is free damage, so people will use what they must to get it on the field. Maybe limiting it to Rock type would technically add value to Rock types, but it doesn't address the core issues of Rock types, namely the relatively mid resistances. Attribute 3. Stealth Rock's damage and type effectiveness. It's a cool idea on paper, a type effective hazard. That's different and unique. But is it fun? Does it serve a purpose? I hear the argument all the time that we need Stealth Rock's type effectiveness to check dangerous Pokemon. And to that I say, what are you talking about? That would imply that Stealth Rock was conceived directly to balance the game, or later Pokemon were designed around Stealth Rock, and neither is the case. Stealth Rock was not conceived just to keep Bug, Fire, Flying, and Ice types in check. It was created because Game Freak thought it would be cool and accidentally turned those 4 types into second-class citizens. In Generation 3, those types were not good enough to make a hazard to keep them in check. In Generation 4, when Stealth Rock was introduced, those types were still mid. Gyarados, Zapdos, and Salamence were the few top Pokemon in Diamond and Pearl that cared about being Stealth Rock weak. Or were you maybe thinking that Stealth Rock kept Skarm Bliss in check? Did Stealth Rock keep Dragon Spam at bay? Nope. It was the Steel types that used to check Dragon Spam. So much so that Drag Mag, or the concept of spamming dragons, then using Magnet Pull to trap and kill Steel types, was conceived, just so that you can spam more dragons. In Generation 5, Rain, Sand, Dragon, Steel, and Fighting types were everywhere. Again, more stuff that doesn't really care about Stealth Rock. Stealth Rock only looks like it checks dangerous threats because those Pokemon are strong enough to be spammed regardless of Stealth Rock. Look at Volcarona. Yes, it's strong despite losing half its health to Stealth Rock, but that is not an accurate indication of a Stealth Rock weak Pokemon. Volcarona is literally the Usain Bolt of bug types, and the bugs it's competing with are primary school students and a few gym teachers. It is simply operating at a different level of value than its competition. After all, it took Terastallization and/or Terra Blast for Volcarona to be banned by Smogon. So much for your Stealth Rocks. Though, it was a council decision, not a suspect test, so I'm not sure what the Smogon community thinks overall. The point is that we shouldn't rely on some random hazard to balance the game, especially when it's just enabling good types and punishing bad types. What if it wasn't Stealth Rock that released in Generation 4? What if Draco Meteor was the new entry hazard in Generation 4, and it was just a draconic Stealth Rock? Wouldn't those hazards keep the really strong Dragon types in check? It certainly would speed up games since Dragon hit everything but Steel, at least neutrally. Would the Ubers and OU player base enjoy dragons losing 1/4 health on the Switch? These are questions we should consider. What if Stealth Rock did flat typeless damage like Spikes? Just one layer that does a flat 1/6 of the max HP on the Switch. It's so easy to set since it's one layer, so the damage should reflect the ease of investment. Another way to do it would be to keep the type effective damage, but make the new max damage 1/4 or 25% max HP, and the minimum 1/12 or about 8%. That way there's still the interesting mechanic, but it tightens up the disparity between rock weak and rock resistant Pokemon. Because let's be real, Stealth Rock helps good types, not rock types. Yeah, rock doesn't resist rock, so rock types don't even resist their own hazard. Attribute 4. Automated hazards. Pokemon is a game where you must factor in opportunity cost. Traditionally, one had to choose between setting hazards and attacking. Invest in future damage, or get damage now. Every turn you had to choose to do it, and manually. So there's something of a matrix of turns invested versus the payoff. If the payoff was good enough, people invested those turns. Generation 9 introduced Glamora, a Pokemon with the ability Toxic Debris, who can automatically set toxic spikes when hit by a physical move. Even further, Pokemon Legends Arceus introduced Ceaseless Edge and Stone Axe, moves that deal good damage and automatically set hazards. There is now no choice or opportunity cost to using the move, because it can't be taunted or magic bounced. Even if you do less damage, you're getting hazards up. Whenever you automate a mechanic, it gets better. Now, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it most certainly rhymes with itself, and Pokemon's history is no different. Something similar has happened a few separate times. First example, let's talk about weather. We've had manually set weather since Generation 2, but it just wasn't worth the time. It only lasted 5 turns, it took a turn to set, took another turn to switch out. Generation 3 introduced 3 abilities that automatically set weather, and that weather lasted forever, but there weren't as many abusers in standard play. Tyranitar's Sandstorms were for chip damage, automatic rain and sun from Kyogre and Groudon were limited to Ubers. Generation 4 added weather extending items, which made manual setting have more potential. And finally, Generation 5 dropped more automatic infinite weather setters, and Pokemon were able to abuse Weather Wars like never before. Next, Terrains. Terrains were introduced in Generation 6, and they were not worth manually setting. The effects were great, but they only lasted 5 turns, so it wasn't worth the time to manually set. However, Generation 7 introduced all the Tapus, which can automatically set terrain, and the item Terrain Extender, which makes terrains last 8 turns instead of 5. Last example, Reflect and Light Screen. These moves are great utility for the team because you can have all damage for as long as they are active. Since they only last 5 turns and it takes 2 turns to set up both, you need to send something in that can capitalize with that short timer. Generation 4 introduced Light Clay, a held item that extended the time on these moves, and made dual screens have more payoff for longer. We have not gotten a Pokemon that can automatically set screens by switching in, but imagine the strength that would have. Prankster Grimmsnarl and Aurora Veil Alola Ninetales get us pretty close. And considering the addition of the screen cleaning ability, which automatically clears screens, Game Freak is aware that screens are strong. The key takeaway is that historically field effects were a one-turn investment that could grow into a better payoff for a few turns. When we automate it with abilities or damaging moves, we save turns and make the effects stronger. Weathers, screens, and terrains can be manually removed or expire on their own, yet manage to be extremely strong. Hazards never expire and had to be manually removed, with the trade-off being that they had to be manually set with a non-damaging move. This is a turning point where the series could make it common to automatically set hazards that don't expire. We don't know what the future holds and how many Pokemon will gain access to moves that do good damage and set hazards in a single turn. We may not even need to wait until Generation 10 for something like that to happen. In Generation 8's DLC, we got new tutor moves from the Sword and Shield Isle of Armor. Moves like Flip Turn, Triple Axle, Grassy Glide, and 15 other moves were added to the game and to a ton of Pokemon. So there is absolutely a precedent, a seed if you will, that has potential to grow into something we aren't ready for. Really consider the future impact of being able to spam a 65 base power, likely stab, move, and set Stealth Rocks. At best, the opponent keeps spinning on you only to lose health and have rocks set right back up, or they defog until they faint. Even if Stealth Rock broke because of a rock type switching in, they can spam the move more effectively than you can switch or volt turn. The point is that power creep is pretty inevitable, but isn't always bad. If we can rein in the strength of a mechanic, then it won't be as broken when the mechanic eventually gets automated. With all the attributes covered, let's discuss implementation and possibilities. In the future, we might get more automated hazards. Maybe more moves that do damage and set hazards, more abilities that set hazards when hit. We might even get more blatant automation, like a regional Komala with the signature ability Crusty Eyes that automatically sets Stealth Rock upon switching in. This is a joke, of course, but it could easily become reality. If we creep to this point, hazards, particularly Stealth Rock, are even easier to set and harder to prevent. The damage of Stealth Rock should either become a flat 1/6 of max HP, or keep the type effectiveness that deals 1/4 to 1/12 max HP. I'm open to both because the Pokemon that resist it have it too good, and the Pokemon that are weak take too much. Nerfing the max damage and buffing the minimum is fairer and more consistent. These options leave room for the developers to add more hazards to the game if we keep the type-based damage. Stealth Rock was too good to do something like add Stealth Rock clones for different types. Picture Stealth Rock and Hot Coals on the field at the same time. Frostmoth is double weak to rock and fire, so it instantly dies on the switch, if it has even HP, and is left on 1 with odd HP. Sounds pretty unfun, doesn't it? If we don't keep the type-based damage, there isn't really a need for Stealth Rock clones other than raising hazard distribution for types that can't get Stealth Rock. I'd also like rock types to have the effect of shattering Stealth Rock upon switching in, just like Poison does for Toxic Spikes. It gives them some more of a defensive benefit for using a rock type specifically. I prefer this over limiting Stealth Rock to rock types only because I prefer to encourage the use of a type rather than force the use of a type. If Stealth Rock is too weak after changes like this, you could even do something like adjust heavy-duty boots to only protect you from ground-based hazards. The possibilities really are endless. After all, the endless possibility is why this video is so long and convoluted. With these changes, Stealth Rock could be more in line with the other hazards. As with all changes, it's something that would really need to be tested and experimented with in battles with the community. And speaking of wild experiments, Freezeye, a competitive Pokemon YouTuber, recently created a Pokemon tournament with prize money on the line. The premise is to battle using Pokemon Company's rules rather than Smogon rules to conduct 6v6 Pokemon battles. This is a great chance to see how Smogon rules versus Pokemon Company rules affect the gameplay experience. Prove your mettle and fight for your ideals. Personally, I'm happy to see the chaos. If you're interested, check out Freezeye's video about it. The link is in the description. Also, Freezeye's video about Ursaluna and Trick Room is another great example of field effects and opportunity cost. It goes over the matrix of opportunity cost and value in a clearer way than I did, and so I'd recommend checking that out too. Depending on what is released in the Scarlet and Violet DLC, or in Generation 10, I'm definitely open to revisiting this topic. But as for now, it's all up to the modders. Until next time, bye everyone.